Yek echa yuxatini yachana. Ye awa tak itide yakunehin. Chosaku kejin gaka ashu. Aqa awe kish kushqit. Ye awa chosatin gank. Achteye yeti awa ya achuni yoda yedi. You awa do a sako. Ye awa achtuasaku yisatini ya ach. Yetki ka akshat hasawa ach jis a joyak eti hu wal ha ide awe guchte shi hu ye awe ach tu ye yeti ya yeki jayek genki a Tlingit de gachtul tu a qat Tl'anaxéedáḳw wishkalnik wujin gachtu tu jaguksa awe ha wutiin gwal ach ide ka gachinik Kakol qatawus ejiye tiach tuasakucho achi. Ye awe ya yidat ye awe ya ji ade ya wujin yeje tunne ya tayach Tlingit ya wan qanin zach tuasakuka gachtu aqu. Qa awe stukachtul tu. Jadada tinachsa ye ti jachan kananik kakwa aq. Ideka kwala tu. Yeke. Ya wasa itu wasa sieti.
Yake galas cheese.
Okay. Hatsu. Ya deja ach ekqa ayata qayata.
Yishan.
Shkhotle chun. Ye awe kacha aqawe we atkachago. Adat ayashtakhal tu. Ya ach I outla tu ach kak yesh yadi. Adekatu chago ya. Ach Kate aya ach tuasaguchal echi. Ja hechosagu asadu asagu at chotlet chach inach vais. Ja tledi hin aya kach watich ach tleq cha wushgate aya au qutl qa. Teg genki chatwitchen. Qaya ya getsu. We achkatil tseqtsi at aya. Kate laya hajiu du chaw ayal de katieche yeti. Jo e takye gikacha aq. We achkatul tseqtsi at tin awe. Ya hita yeti. Hita washin. Ye awe achtuasagu we yi ati tayich. Qayes tin wudutli yecha oida qa. Yatatsu. Heshwasa uteqa. Zjaigu genki Yanik Achin Yanik. Ye awe qa wan qanin haqusti. Dasatse. You qaila
Ach furniture journey that kach shachit qua Tlingit journal tunach wita lisa ach furniture journey Stuart chaltu nadak khau Ja, Rubbermaid cooked stuchaltun. Wait, Rubbermaid tote. Yes, deski cook ik yeuti. Waliech. Tletsu takach chatechun. Ako achune kach achliet achjit outlaat. Ja, kuchjas kachu. ku kinde ke khoyesh. Ka ye khwa. Kachliach. We do khwaliach ya. Gunnaf Chishach furniture journey a dat yisache.
Echa, Gunachisha inki niki ata. Tlidzi wan kanins ya atlen ataya atui tiwe kuk. Ye awe wan kanins khatsu. Watu u. Ka awe hajita chausa u. Ye awe wan kanins khasatin atlen at khatsati. Ho, tlidzi yutik. Qanakhu keqa de yuqi tani. Gulchish. Tukka.
Nelato Aktusigu bookcase. Chat. Ganaschish.
Chat box tunach kachshikit.
Ganaschish.
Okay. Okay. Tukka. Das hat's. Touched egg.
Ishkalik. Tatke. Tu dutik at akjitudi is. Ishan wila ice cream. Usaka. Atshajikawiak. Wutsaka ice cream for dinner. Atshijikawudiak. Tsutsat yayagi. Kusi atka. Ajitse ditan yanagut. Ya asine weka. Yake tu aditlik gunachish with John Howard. And I meant to have his graphic. Donald Gregory drew the picture for him. I love finding the verb that said, we made ourselves eat the ice cream that melted.
Yeah, ordered myself to work.
Yes, and here's the picture. Kusi atka. He comes to people's houses to make the refrigerators and freezers work. So, very cool.
Ganaschi ish chawe. Ishan wan qanins ya wuntletiki we atuch dutletiki ataya. Kleidehin gosh kuntakso ishuhi. Jinkat kadech tak shuhi aya khatra akhshat hawush with the shine. Ye awa hachoni tsu. Hu awa wush gachtu shine. Like hu awa wush hasak shine. Ye awa ya ach we wutlet iki cook tu yeti Tl'ain atcha. Ya achoni Dan Marino aya yidu sakan. Ka guantan ka awe ha. Wasa ach eat with the shi. Ya haji dawati ta qukandli Tlingit Chai. Ya hachuni ko agwal dis aya hashukak. Hu oe wush with the shah de chuchtin. Has di tawasagu ya ach ayi has our hees. We gao, konachach tawasagu, Jimi Hendrix ya chat ya ti. Ya kadu tlaku puk aya konachawe kachwa ach. Atcholla achi. Ya ach tu ye uti. Ach tu sagu aya cholla achi we atshe. Akawa gwatli te yach ya ti we atshe. Ye awa hachuni ko awa his ha ai. Qacht daqhi has ausane ko. We kashuk at yata yacheti kashuk tiki. Ya kashuk adach aya ye has ausane. Tel has aus kuko we tek we atwutlet iki kuk. Ye awa tel kashuk atuk ya kanadin. Heshwatusaku gand wati ha hiti egg. Fairbanks aya wuti ha hiti. Kutan awe. Play the hin ya akshat. Dasach wasenich lichani at. Hit day wu good. Would the tlach ayal the katha at chai. Klein at chai aye wuti. Ni shan awe uhan. Ya achaya would would eat. Yisat hatuasagun. Khatka yejechwane. Carcass natasahini. Ka I khoslatu Tlingit. Kuchte khwata kukh. Yakshat khatjiwa ak. Guk khatjakawa ak. Guk na us. Kanachlichani at. Kakwa ak kaachtuasagu. Khotlaku. E. Ye awa. Kunachawe kakwa ak kakwa usi. Wasad gukwaneko ash. The kata at chai hawush with the shai. Kach aya kelhaji. Tl'anaxéedáḳw hachun kian yis at chahajitas awati. Ya achuni Dan Marina. Tsu kuchwadaqin aya yis at chatin. Buakandli, tawedli, ziskli, tzadli, itkazaw, chat, Tl'anaxéedáḥw. Ya achchan sak ho o ausa I. Yalta katwe ku eis. Tl'anaxéedáḥw kian ag haswatian. Dakakwan at lechi. Haji yesawe has awat lech. Deering cut down you has ayasak to. We hasawe at shi wula ach. Haji yes. Yewa hatu echa. Yewa gunchish hadisa achi. Ya hawush with the shy dan. Tsuk ayakutzati tashi de kakuniki datcha. Das hat sie. Tsuk ke. Gunchish. Anybody got any questions? Thoughts? Can anybody summarize my big story?
Hey, 12 years ago, you guys were going to a Jimi Hendrix concert and you're
That's good. Yeah, we were gonna get married, and I wanted to be Jimi Hendrix at that time. Okay.
And
So
Jimi Hendrix ruined a lot of food.
all the pieces are there.
Oh, it was.
Dan Marino was the officiant at your wedding, and he threw a football into your freezer.
It was like a telephone. It's like
But what a wonderful list of food in the electric refrigerator.
Oh yeah, sheesh.
All
Yes,
food.
12 years ago we were gonna get
I
married.
really would have loved it if you added all those meats together in one thing and made it like a Tlingit surf and turf, man. That would have been pretty fantastic.
So our friend was getting married 1 month before us. This friend of mine, his name was, oh, did I freeze? His name was Dan Moreno. We'd tease him about being a football player too. But he gave us a whole bunch of food, king salmon and deer meat, and all kinds of food. And I wanted to be a rock and roll guy, so would play music all the time. And I had a bunch of music gear. And our friends wanted to borrow it for their wedding, which was totally fine. And but when they unplugged everything, they accidentally unplugged the freezer. We were living in Fairbanks. I was working in Carcross teaching Tlingit. The freezer was behind the house, and nobody knew it was unplugged. And all of a sudden, my wife's walking around. She's like, "What is that stink?" And goes back and finds. And so they were. I think my little brother was the one who got rid of all the food. It was in bad shape. Hot Fairbanks summer, just sitting there for probably a week or two. You know, pretty bad shape. And so he cleaned it out, but she said I tried to clean it, but well, he cleared it out, and then she said I tried to clean it, but it's just gonna make me throw up. So I saved it for you. So when I came home, I cleaned it all out, and we were just kind of sad because like we had all this food saved up for a wedding, and let a few people, and all of a sudden people just brought all kinds of. So we went up with all kinds of just great food that my mother-in-law to be at the time, she's my mother-in-law now. She cooked it all. She cooked like so much food. It was amazing. And we had a dance group who came, and Deering and Down. I've known them for a long time. They were like a kind of a local band, and then they went to Memphis, and they play music, and they were there. So it was fun. It just made me think of that stuff. Thinking of a freezer. Yeah. Any questions? Anything you folks been thinking about? Language stuff. Okay. Well, we'll go over a few lists of things and how they work. What things when you add them together, what happens? Hold on, I gotta add a few things here. And let's see. Where am I gonna put this one? Okay. We're gonna have to bring the napkin back out too. So let me copy and paste one more thing. Okay, now I'm ready. So we are going to talk about what's going on here. I might have changed something. Okay, hold on. Okay, something changed now. I'll figure it out. Oh, I think I know I did. Well, I'll fix it later. Okay, so we're going to talk about bases and suffixes, like what happens when you put a suffix onto something. And so here's, and then once we're done with this, we'll get back into Tl'anaxéedáḳw. So, okay, I'll just keep hitting on this. Like we've talked about some of this stuff before, but I want to show some specifics about what happens when you add these suffixes. Hold on, let me actually try and fix this real quick. I think I messed. There it is. Okay. Now I know what I did. Okay, bear with me. I gotta add two things to this. This guy and the napkin. So these direction and location things are important. So there's kind of, I think, two kind of main things that we're focusing on right now, which is direction, location, what happens when we start putting things together, and then the verbs. right? So those are kind of the two areas of focus right now for intermediate Tlingit. And so we're going to study some stuff, look at examples, and they're lists of things, which aren't always easy. Someday someone's going to come up with a whole bunch of fun activities for how to teach this stuff. But so let's go back, and then we'll look at Tl'anaxéedáḳw. And then when we read the story, we're continuing to look at verbs and look for all these types of things, right? So one is these are the most common suffixes. Well, these are all the relational suffixes. So they're talking about where things are at. But when you talk about them in Tlingit, you got to say not only where they're at, but sort of like, and how are they there, right? So it's not just to be somewhere. It's to be somewhere and how it's being there. That stuff is packed into a pretty small space, usually with just a single suffix. So does anybody know the general rule of suffixes and vowels? There's kind of a guideline there. It has to do with tone.
I was trying to remember, you said if it's an open suffix, then the tone is opposite of the root or the noun.
Yeah, so if it's open, so open means it ends with a vowel. Closed means it ends with a consonant. So if it's open, it's usually a flexible tone. So it will be the opposite of whatever's right behind it. So your hit is high tone, so you expect hit day. Neish is low tone, so you would expect neish day. So it's all, and so usually I don't even mark it. I'll just mark it low, but then you just got to sort of explain, like, just keep an eye on that. That's a pretty standard rule. Like, that's a pretty good default. Is like, if it's ends with a vowel as a suffix, it'll be the opposite of what's before it. Okay. If it ends with a consonant, then it's usually just a short three-letter thing, dach and nach, and it'll always be high. Okay. So with that, some of these will also refer to time, and some of them, the meaning of it could sort of change a little bit. But starting with this one, dach.
Dach.
That one is from or out of. Okay, dach. So hit dach from the house. Hit ye dach from inside of the house. Tu dach from inside of it. Ka dach coming off of it. Okay. This will sometimes just be a T underline X. So you can say qudach, which has this suffix on there, and qudach means too much, or you could say qudch. Either one, same thing. It can also contract just to an underline X. So a dach would be from it, or in some cases off of it, and that could just be ach. So you'll see that. You'll see that contraction happen sometimes. This could also be since that time. A way to do that would be yidaq khat sati yidach awa, from the time I was a young man. So you can just sort of put it onto a verb. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's the basics of what you're doing. And you're saying since that verb happened. Day is towards. So like you just imagine something in your hand and you're going to go day dach, day dach, day dach, day dach. Okay, so towards and away from. Those ones they're kind of opposites. Oops, I didn't have the chat open. Hold on. Oh, okay. Goodness, sheesh. Duck juice. We'll talk about that in a second. What I just saw in the chat. Thanks for sharing that. Okay. So day can also be until that time. So an example would be you could say yidati dach. Yidat is now. Yidati dach would be from now forward. Yidati day, up until now. So as far as time references, they're a little tricky sometimes. But just remember, they can refer to time. Our main focus now is on direction and location. Okay. Nach is through or along. So it kind of depends on how it's being used. It could mean going. Wushnach wushkak is the name of a little bird. It's called a wren. It means lands in a hole. Wush is a hole. Nach is through. Wushkak is for a bird to land, or a plane, or I guess a person if they're hang gliding, or for someone to squat, or for an octopus to walk. That's pretty cool. So there's the nach part, right? And it could mean including the time of. It's probably a little less used with time, although there's this construction kanach, and sometimes it's chanach, and that means over a course of time. So you could say, they were there for 2 years, right? The T, so these next 4 all have to do with being at somewhere. So there are 4 ways to say it's there, it's at that place. This one most often means it has kind of recently arrived there, or it's specifically standing or sitting there. It likes to use that one. There's kind of a variant, and I tend to think it's almost like a separate but related one, which means moving around at a place. And it's always just going to be ut. So if it's ut wugut, walking around, right? So that's T, so it's at, but it's, in my mind, it's like it kind of recently arrived there. This one, w or is also is at or are at, but this one cannot be used with a verb. You cannot use this one. So if you say wedu, yadu, neitlu, shkunu, gusu, ya, any of those, you cannot have a verb in that sentence as well. You can have like 2 different sort of combined sentences. Wedu, aha, there they are, eating. They are eating it, right? So this one is also at, but it's sort of like at rest, residing. So sometimes there's nothing there, like ka and tu, they just tend to go long. Nadak ka yeyeti. But that same verb, you would say shqagwek yeyeti, shawak yeyeti, and at skagwe, at klawak. This one also is the time marker. So a lot of folks, when they're starting to use Tlingit, they'll just use what they know from English. So they'll say, in the winter, oh, talk to. And it's like, well, no, it's talk. You just put that marker on there. Same thing, on Wednesday, naskyagik. So that's when you know you're not just saying 3 days, you're saying on the 3rd day. Talk itik. Right, and so that's how the time markers work, right? As far as using this. In the wintertime, a lazy person is gonna starve. Underline X is to be moving around or repeatedly coming to a place. So, keep an eye on some of these. When you're using verbs, ach it iteshe, idekakkonik, gunchish ach ich iteshi. They are used sometimes to talk about verbs and time occurrences. So if something needs to arrive somewhere, sometimes it's the T. If something is going to arrive somewhere, right? There's an N one as well, which is with. We'll look at that one in a second. So that's why you say, in kakwanik, I told it to you. Ide kakwanik. So this one pops up in a lot of the future forms of these verbs. Okay? Any questions about that stuff?
When you're writing something, do you write it at a journal or like at the chat box?
I would say cuck, because you're writing it onto a surface. The chat box thing is interesting too, because it could be. I don't really think of it as tuk, because that's a closed container. So like I would say tuk if I like wrote on a little piece of paper and then I put it in a bottle and then I plugged it up and I threw it in the ocean. That would be tuk. Yeah, that's a good question. I would probably say cuck. Even and we got into this thing too, like when we were saying TV and they were talking about like the television, and then they were saying cuck, the elders, and we're like, yeah, but isn't it kind of like on the face of it or inside of it? And they're like, yeah, that's right. Then they just went back to cuck, and so we're like, okay, well they know, that's just us thinking about it in English, right? And so yeah, those are always there's always going to be ones you run into where when someone hears it, they might say, no, it's actually going to be this one. So, and there's some folks who've done a lot of these sort of experiments, sitting there with a cup and putting lids on the cup and working with like speakers and putting different things in the cup, and they had a lot of fun with that. Okay. So let's start by putting them on these guys. So here's someone talking. We got a talker here. They are talking. So according to them, from their perspective, they have ya, he, we, and you.
Yeah.
So the ya is right here. The we is over there. The he is somewhere in between, a little bit mysterious, but it's usually generally sort of here. And then you is way over there. Okay. So now we're going to start putting suffixes on these things, right? So you could say from right here, like if it was here and it left. There's two ways you could say it. Everyone say yadach. Towards here. And then this is like coming right up to me. Yade. Through right here. And this one is also used to sort of say, well, I think it might be a different one that sounds exactly the same. But just remember, this one would be like to be going past something. It drove past my house. You drove past the store. You just went past it. Yanach. Going back, you can say ya or ya. It doesn't matter which one you say. Ya and ya. But once you put a suffix on there, look at all of these. They all go long. All of them are long. Yacht.
Yacht.
Yadu.
Yadu.
So the pattern for the others is going to be very similar. We're just going to change that first sound. All of them are long and high, right? So this one is he.
Heh.
And we get heydach.
Heydach.
Heyday.
Heyday.
And this one is used a lot for like opening things. Tsu he de shugach tutana. So tsu, again. He de, this direction. Shu is the end of something. Gach tu, we are gonna. Tan, to open or close a lid or a door. Heinach,
Heinach.
hate,
Hate.
heidu,
Heidu.
heich,
Heich.
heich,
Heich.
we,
We.
weidach,
Weidach.
wait,
Wait,
weide,
wait,
weinach,
Weinach.
wait,
wait,
weidu,
weidu,
weich,
Weich.
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 So there's some of these you're not going to use a whole lot, but you could say weide nagu, go over there. You could say that. Weidachya nagutyade. They're coming from over there towards this direction. Wait, right? Wait, hun. They're standing over there.
Some of them sound so close together, like when you're listening to, I mean, I guess you just kind of sort out which one it should be because you can't really tell.
Yeah, sometimes, and some of them are going to sound just like something else, and so it's sort of like your brain. You're just sort of filling your brain with all this language, and then it starts to sort of, once it hears the things that are around it, it does often figure out what that other thing is when it could be one thing or the other. Kuch.
You know, that kind of reminds me of a question that I would like to ask in regards to when you're listening to somebody and you know what they're saying, but you hit one word, you have no idea what they're talking about. Then you get stuck on the word and you lose everything else that comes after that. Is that just something you got to deal with until it gets better, or what's the best way to handle that?
Yeah, my advice is to I used to carry a little notebook all the time. And even though it was just kind of weird to just sort of pull out a notebook, I would just pull it and I would just write that word down as fast as I could. Or I'd try to just think of it and try to just sort of just say, I can't dwell on it. I gotta move on. Because all of you are either at or going to soon be at this space where you can't translate fast enough for yourself. This is one of the most challenging points of a Tlingit learner, because you're going to have to let go of the dock and let the boat go out into the ocean, right? But it is scary. It's very scary, and it's also troubling, because I think your brain, you got a full-grown brain, and the brain's like, I want to know everything that's going on. I am not used to hearing language, and not, I mean, like, if, you know, I guess a similar thing would be if you're speaking English and then people were using a whole bunch of words you didn't know, that could be a little disorienting. But for Tlingit, I think you have to sort of, what I try to do is I just take a guess at what that thing is. I'm okay, I think that's this. And then I'll just try not to get too distracted. Because I do believe that the English part of your brain is always just sort of like, what about me? You know, and so it just says, come over here and let's think about it, talk about it. And you, man, I miss you, you know, and so you got to sort of move on from that and not let it sort of interfere. Oops, my phone was on. But that's a good question. I think a lot of folks who reach this phase, that is a big part of it. And listening to, and don't feel bad if you don't get it. And one time I was taping these two elders who were talking, and they kept saying, they just had a different way of saying the same word. I think it was when I was first hearing gi a lot for ge, right? It's ge here and it's gi in the interior, like the yes or no question marker. And I was like, oh, they're using this gi. And I started thinking about it. Next thing you know, they turn, even though they're being recorded, they turned to me and they're like, do you know what we're saying? I was like, oh, well, I did, but then I just started thinking about this gi thing, so sorry, you know. So because the speaker could probably tell, they could just probably see it in your face when you sort of roll into this whole other realm about thinking about the particulars. So I think you're trying to get the big picture stuff now, and then don't worry about those little pieces, even though there could be something important in there. I do think that the tendency is for everybody to switch back to English so that we can keep everybody comfortable. But then that keeps us sort of, this little staggered movement doesn't always work. It does get better though. It does. And pretty soon you'll just sort of like, oh yeah, you know.
Geesh, I think that's where I'm stuck the most, because like I hear these words and I'm picking up on what's going on, then I hear something that'll throw me off, and then I'm like, I don't even remember the rest of the conversation anymore.
Right. Okay. Sheesh. Okay, but one more of these things, I think. You. Udach.
Udach.
Utch.
Youth.
Ude.
Ude.
Unach.
Unach.
Ut.
Ute.
Udu.
Udu.
Yuch.
Uke.
Yuch. So here's a different thing. So we can put all of these onto this question marker. Gu. So then we can see what we're saying here. From where? Gu dachsa. Gu desa.
Good day, sir.
Gu nachsa.
Gunaksa.
Gutsa.
Gutta.
Gusu.
Gusupu.
Guchsa.
Guksa.
Guchsa.
Guksa.
So with this one, this is with gusu. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit of noise. Okay. Gusu is the only one where the suffix actually jumps over the sa. So that is what happens because guwusa is a little too awkward to say. So usually a language, it's sort of like a, if you have just sort of some running water or something, it's going to find the path of least resistance. So if stuff gets too awkward to say, it'll find a shortcut. And it is common for sounds to just jump right over another one. This isn't the only time you're going to see that.
How about goo goo? I hear that all the time. Is it the same goo on both goo and goo?
It's a gugu, something like that.
Something like that. But I've heard it on I just heard it a bunch of times.
That one I think comes from the verb root gook, which means to master something as some kind of skill, to have some sort of knowledge of how to do something. So I've heard of like something a gugu, like the knowledge of it, the know-how, the ability to know how to do it. That's how I've heard it referred to. But so it's a different one.
Okay.
There, you could with this one put. Sometimes you'll hear klesh in front of it. Klesh guksa would be nowhere, especially this one right here. There was an elder, and he had spoken Tlingit with us in Yakutat, and then his name was Wushchachuish. His name was Wushchachuish, George Ramos. Then he was getting on his four-wheeler to go drive home, and I said, "Gunish chish, tsuye kwasatin." And he looked at me and he put his sunglasses on and he goes, "Chaguksa," and then he went, it just took off. I was like, "That's the cool exit." He was like, "Wherever," and then he just took off. So it was pretty fun. But so these ones, so once you ask the question, gu daksa, you're gonna get the same suffix back. Gu daksa hi gut. Where'd you come from? Tl'anaxéedáḳw gut. I came from home. Gu desa ya nigut. Where are you going? Hundakahiti dayan hakut, right? Gunaksa is also what you say when someone sneezes. I don't know if y'all know that. I don't know if we talked about it here. Left side's supposed to be lucky. So if someone says gunaksa, you're not supposed to say gunachchish. You're supposed to say tzatnach or shinach or chenach, shtakatyenach, everywhere. Okay. Here's some examples of how this stuff works. This is a ceremonial phrase. This is how you would greet a canoe that's coming to your village. Okay. So you'd say, Gudachsawegi yagu. And then they might respond, Hunadachaya hayagu. So there's dach and dach. They match up. Even if by this point, people already know usually where these canoes are coming from. But this is a ceremonial greeting. Like usually people would be yelling this really loud. Or, but also this, if you didn't know where they were from, this would be the first thing you'd say. And then it'd be followed by, why are you coming? What do you want? And usually someone would go out in another canoe and meet them. Just be like, are we fighting? Okay, no, we're not. Okay, just gotta check. Make sure we're not fighting. And that way we can bring you back to the village and everybody's safe, feels good. So here's another one. Gutesahyanikut. Where are you going? Hundakahiti deyan hagut. So we see that? Da ka hi di de. All that matters is that vowel before it. That's low, so the day is high, right? Tl'anaxéedáḳw. Where did they nail it through? Tl'anaxéedáḳw. So there's a nach through the face of the board. They nailed it through. Some more. Gutsa'uwakuch. So this one, there's two ways to use a perfective of motion, usually, right? So we'll hear uwakuch and wukuch. The difference is all made by the suffix. The suffix makes the difference here. Gut sa means to arrive somewhere. So in Tlingit, a lot of times, especially with motion, but you'll see it with other verbs, they don't just talk about the fact that it happened. They'll say, this thing has already happened. But then they'll talk about, did it reach its completion? So you have to sort of, when you're talking about going somewhere, there's sometimes a difference between they went there and then they made it to where they were going. And Tlingit will signal those things using the grammar. So in this case, you could say, where did they arrive to? Would probably be another way to interpret that. And then you'd see the same thing. Nicht uwakuch. Okay? Same thing, like, I think we'll do it. So all of these, so there was another one, we might remember, ha, which would be this area around us. So we could have ha-dach, ha-tch, ha-day, right? You'll hear that in ku'ik, ha-day. That's from these two things. Ha-nach, hat, gunalchish, hat, yigudi. You don't really say ha-do. Ha and ha, you could. Probably not that often. Gusu achkisi. Yadu ikisi. So again, the suffixes are matching here. Guksa yeyeti ish. De shu yeyeti ach ish. Okay, there's this thing gets affected, right? This ending gets affected by a suffix that pushes it along. Guksa shkanaltzech. Where are they biking along? Yuch shkanaltzech. Right, so same thing. The big thing here is there's an underline X, so that's what it's going to match it with. Okay. Back to the napkin. These are the in things, right? This is the in thing. Ka, yik, tu, tak, yi. Okay, these are your sort of main categories of being in things. Okay, and I like this napkin because we've been working on Tlingit all day, like teaching and learning and stuff. Then we had this just sort of crash course over dinner. And my buddy, he's pulling out a napkin. He's like, I gotta get these things straight. And he wrote them all on a napkin, so that I took a picture of it. And it has a special message on the bottom, which I can't remember why that message is on there. We'll get to that at the end. Okay, so all of these are relational, which means they need to have a noun in front of it. And is totally fine. The other thing with these things in Tlingit is they use possessive pronouns. That's not how English does it, right? English uses what I think sound like object pronouns. On me, happened to me. On her, happened to her. On them, happened to them. Tlingit, you could say, my on, my inside. That's just the way the language works. So, ka, and you'd say a ka. We'll just put a in front of there. That is on something. That is also in any kind of spillable container. Bucket, cup, you would say pour it in my cup, but I would use ka in that case. And in some open container, even if it's a box. If the box is open and something's in it, it is ka. If the box is closed and something's on it, that's also ka. It's just one of those things. Okay? Yik. To start thinking about this one, it's a shallow container. But, what does that mean to be a shallow container? It requires a little bit of just thinking about some of this stuff. It is floating in water. A boat is going to be hin yik if it's in the river. That's what it does. It's hin yik. And a road is a river and a car is a boat. That's how Tlingit thinks of things. So a car, so if you're in the road, that's de yik. It's not de ka. And it's not like that's wrong, but it's just like, you just say de yik. De yik. De yik. It's going along in the road, right? So this is also in the water. This is my theory on it. If the water is deep enough that you could submerge yourself when you laid down, if you laid down on it and then you could not breathe, like if you were laying all the way on the bottom of it, that's tak. If you lay down in it and you could still breathe, that's yik. So water up to your ankles, that's hin yik. Water above your knees, that's probably hin tak. So there's a difference, yik and tak, okay? There are other unusual things, I think, that are also yik. In a tree, that's yik. As yik. Unless you're a porcupine, then you could be as yi because you live in that tree. It's kind of like your house. I don't know. I've heard that. In the forest, askatu yik. And then, who's drawing on my napkin? In the road and in a creature's body. It's debatable maybe if you swallowed it, whether that's yik or tu. It's probably yik because it could come back out. I don't know. But if you pull out the organs, like say you were hunting and you're going to pull out all the inner organs after you're cleaning up your kill, those are called yik adi. Okay? Tu is inside a closed container. So if a box with a lid, As long as that lid is closed, now it's tu. You open that lid, now it's ka. And you put it in that box, it is not actually yik. I used to use that one all the time. It's that kuk yik, and they're like, no, that's not yik. It's just different in Tlingit. Inside of people, especially like in your mind, not really in your belly. I don't think that's, maybe, I don't know. Abstract concepts inside of, when you're talking about stuff, then it's sort of like generally inside of it. That would work. Talk in a body of water, so especially towards the bottom, but anywhere that's submergible all the way down to the bottom. There's ways to certainly specify at the very bottom of the lake. In a hole or a pit, in between two, like if you had these two cliff faces, right there, talk. In a cavity, which includes, as we saw in the story, your eye sockets. There's a talk there. Anybody know how to say in your mouth? Anybody? And if you don't know, anybody want to guess?
Ka.
It's a good guess. It's not. It's close. That is very close. There's one part. The first part has to change.
Ka.
Not
No.
he, but it is ka. It ends with ka. So in your mouth. Anybody else? So there's a few body parts that are really interesting to me because they all get this very similar, like consonant vowel combination. Sh, ya, sh, sa. Okay. And what's really interesting is all four of those could be classifiers, right? Each one of the groups. Maybe there's a relation there, maybe not. Sa is the base of your neck. You don't usually hear people just say sa. It's usually in combination with sadatai is a warming around the base of the neck. That's a scarf. Sate is sa'at, base of the neck thing. Shla is the neck. But that's also one you don't usually hear on its own. Shleituch is inside of the neck. Shledik is the back of the neck. Shaka is on the neck, which is how you say in the mouth. It's so interesting to me the way there's no in there at all. It's just like, oh yeah, it's on my neck. And how do you put it on your neck? You put it in your mouth. I don't know.
Trippy. Is it because you're like eating food and it goes down your neck or something?
Makes sense to me, right? But so there's just this stuff, and this is the logic of the language, right? In these relations between things and how we think about them. And so, okay. Ye, inside a building or a home. So if you want to say in the store, in the house, whatever, it's ye. Okay, just remember that one. That's another one too, because you could say yechit yidach. That could be part of your introduction. If you've already talked about your name and your clan, if you said yechit yidach, you're saying from inside the Raven House. And that's how you could say that's another way to say what your clan house is. A little trick with this one. If you are inside the building, you would usually switch from ye to neich. That's why you say neich. If you are outside the building, you would say hit ye gu. It's a little finer point there. And then at the bottom, we're probably talking trash about somebody. I don't know, maybe. But this says kesh shkadushich. People do not praise themselves. I don't know why we said that. Someone was probably bragging about themselves, and or maybe it just came up in a fun way. I don't know. Kuch, dasa.
So when I say I'm going home next day, that's not right. It should be ye day.
Okay. Trick number 2. There are 2 different neish. How am I supposed to pluralize that? There are 2 neish. Okay. One is a home. Ach neili, neilde. Those are totally fine. There is a second neil, which means to be inside of a building. So you use the first. The first one is more commonly used in language. So it's totally fine. Ach neili, id neili, neilde, neildach. That's totally fine. You could also say ach neili yide if you're specifying I'm going inside of my own house.
Oh, jeez.
Those are really fine-tuning things, like an old TV set, put it on like channel 13, and then you got the little spinning dial on the inside. From long ago. Okay. Now what's next? Okay, we got some more. We'll do one more, and then we'll take a break. Because I want to talk about G for a second. So this is possession. Okay. The important thing to think about as we look at G is this, the way that English uses the word like have or has or had is quite a bit different than this. In some ways similar, but you say like I have a dog, I have a sister, you know, I have some time. But in English, like sometimes you're not using a verb for these things, like jiwu. That's totally verbless. There's no verb there. So, G is possession, related to hand, right? But it is not hand, okay? So, from my possession, so this is how you could say like I lost it, or somebody took it from me, something like that. Jidach. Jidach.
G.
You could also, like I could say this, there's no verb in this sentence at all. I could say, Ijiyis achtla jidach. Ijiyis achtla jidach. Ijiyis achtla jidach. What did I just say? What do you think?
For you from my mom.
One more time?
This is for you from my mom.
Yes, this is for you from my mom. So again, there's no verb there at all, right? And so using verbless phrases is sometimes kind of helpful to know how to do that, because then you don't have to think about how to change the verb in all these 20 different ways, right? So jidach could be like somebody gave it to someone. It depends on the context. Or like hajit neshich hayuqatangi. They would say that sometimes. Our language it's just running right out of our hands. We're losing it. Jide. Jinach. Jeet.
Jeet.
Jiwu.
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 Jich.
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 So the important thing about jiwu, like I have, like there's no verb there, right? Something that's in your possession. I don't think this works well for kinship terms, like I have a brother. It's like well, you just say achunch, right? Well, there's different ways to deal with that. But then if you say like I have dana ach jiwu, I got money. Klech dana ach ji. So the w falls off when you don't have it. You don't say klech ach ji w, just klech ach ji. The other thing with that is you would switch it down to this one or up to this one if you wanted to talk about had, but not anymore. That's how I would take care of it. So I'd say dana ach ji yewuti. I had money. Dana ach ji de yek kwati. I'm gonna have money. So you have to use verbs to now start moving it around as far as time goes. This is just at my possession. This one is used for handing all kinds of things. Thank you for giving it to me. Achite, Don, give me money. That's how you say it. So the jeet, to put it to my possession. Okay. Okay. Any questions about the G?
Oh, when you say I used to not have a bed or a table.
So you would say, hold on. Let me see if I can just add some text here. Okay, so the first part is you'd need to say tlech, right? Because it's not there anymore. Okay, so then I would say ach, G. In this case, I would just say G with no suffix on it. So not my possession. Then we're going to have the ye for like to be located at. That's not really what it means when you put ye yati to be that way. So then I would put it like this. So this is where another layer of concept. So one is the w is not necessarily saying past tense, but let's talk about this verb in terms of whether or not it has already happened. Okay, that's what the w does. So there's like some, again, little fine-tuning differences between these. So if you say tlech ach chi ye wuti, I didn't have it. That's all you're saying. I did not have it. So that's what the wuti is doing here. Oops. Sorry. Added. It shouldn't be, that's not long. It should be short. Tlech ach chi ye wuti. But what the in does is said it used to be that way, but now it's not. So this is where you can get like a kind of a double negative in Tlingit that makes sense. It used to not be in my possession. So this is saying I didn't have it, and this is saying I used to not have it. But the way I would interpret this last part is now I do. Another, like, I'm running out of space here. Another way that this could work is if you had, like, we'll just watch how this verb changes. Maybe we'll try and make this bigger. Okay, so we have this verb. Oops. Can someone tell me what that means? Chwasaku.
When you understand something?
Yeah, I know it. So there's an it on there, so I know it. What would I do if I wanted to make this negative? I don't know it.
Tlech pasiku. Added tlech.
Yeah, away. So we're going to add tlech, and then we're going to
close the verb.
Well, not quite close it, but so let's take a look at the different parts that are in here. So in chwasaku, you have y plus cha plus se plus ku. So now we got to start sort of tracking all the little components because they are going to go through changes. So chwasaku is how we memorize this phrase, this verb. Perfective marker, which just says, let's talk about it in terms of whether or not it has happened. The perfective marker plus the I form of the classifier, those two things combine to say, it happened. It happened. That's what those two things do. That plus that equals yes, it happened. Not past tense, because Tlingit, it's not really a time thing. The cha is who did it. I did it. y plus cha will always equal hua. That y just jumps right over it. That's just something that happens. And then this is long and high. So there's a couple things. Let me show you the things that now must change. So now we get tlech, and then we're still going to have y, but now we add this one. This u sound means not, it means not that way. Not that way or didn't happen. Okay, so that's specifically saying no, not that way. Every negative form must have this u in there. And a lot of times these two, they just sort of, they combine and they just become one single thing. Okay. Now, the I must get knocked out of the classifier and go back to its normal form. So just think of this letter I as saying, happened. That's what the I does, is it usually says happened. Okay. So then we get sa. The last thing is we get a slight change in the root. The stem goes k. So by that, we have tlech chosak. I don't know it. Now, last step, then we'll take our break, fine. Okay. So, we're going to add this. We're going to add the possessive suffix. And this suffix, it's actually just the un or in. But we got to add this because you can't just have an open. You got to kind of close that ending a little bit. So, as far as meaning goes, this means I used to not know it. So this is the English equivalent to this, which you do use, is I didn't know that. But now I do. Tlech. The front part's going to be the same, but then we're going to get this thing. It's a common thing that when something ends with a short, high vowel, when you put a suffix on it, it will often get pushed long and low. Tl'anaxéedáción. I didn't know that. Okay. Good enough now? Nikeka. That was a lot. It's kind of packed in there.
Don't see the ch in either
Oh,
the second or the
goodness,
third
sheesh, I
sentence.
forgot them. Goodness, sheesh. Good catch. That's because I don't praise myself. I'm just kidding. Okay. So sometimes we're going to just sort of pull the things apart just so you could see them, and then when they go back together, right? Then you'll see what happens and the ways that they interact with each other. This is a kind of a critical component as we move out of memorization and start stepping into language use. Because then we're going to change cha to I, to zero, right? We're going to change that pronoun, right? And then so what we're going to start sort of moving towards is sometimes starting to learn how to put these things together. What do you do to make a perfective verb? There's this, and again, sort of like, here's this set of rules. And then once we do the rules, I think it's abstract, it's kind of confusing. There's a whole bunch of things that are all interacting with each other at the same time. But then once we start running through examples, like you'll see it, and it'll start to become a little more clear.
Does it ever occur like I used to know it, or is that like once you chosaku, you always chosaku?
Yeah, so you could say this, right? You could say, so this one's going to be exactly the same, except we're just going to take the, oops, my fingers are in the wrong spot. So that would be chosakuun. I used to know it. I don't know it now. So again, what you would have here you would actually have the exact same thing without the tlech. Because this decessive part also will add this to say, not that way, didn't happen. That's why you go from you do wasak, that wa part is the I form of the classifier. It does happen. Or it did happen, right? And then you go to you do sagen. So that just pushes it. Well, I guess that doesn't need to be there, maybe. I don't know. Because it's not there for that one. You do sagen. You don't say you do sagen. Okay. Let me open this thing and then clear. Okay. All right. Let's take a break. Come back in about well, I don't know. Take 10. Does that sound good? Okay. See you at 7. Dachadu shuka.
Tl'anaxéedáḳw.
Sheesh, يكيخا خساتيني.
Use it.
Masasiyeti.
Xatyake.
يكيخا. Tasiyeta ine. Oh, that's okay.
Oops.
Clum.
Exquasiku.
Oh, how?
Tl'anaxéedáḳw.
Yata, what hast du yes aya? Wuch in kekachtushi. Ach, not classy that. Ach, chwasanuk wegandets aji yadi. Ach, tachat yausaka. Italy day. Cook. What's it?
I don't
Ach, chwasanuk. Yeah, away. So, my kids had a little, like, just like some tape of lullabies. Well, when they meant tape, it was like a, what do you even call it these days? Like a downloaded album. And so one of the songs said, I'm picking up a baby bumblebee. Won't my mommy be so proud of me? And then there was more to it, right? I was like, what kind of lyrics is this? So then I made a Tlingit version. So, ach, there's that contraction, adach. Ach, chwasanuk, I'm picking up a living creature. We gundits aji yadi, this baby bee. Ach, tla chatyaw saka, my mom said to me, Italy day. Would work out with the kids, and they'd love the Italy day part. Okay. Any thoughts, questions? We're gonna move into the story. There was a good hour of like intense list building stuff. Oops. So we'll come back to that on Thursday as well. And we'll do a few more of these, just adding suffix to things, looking at what happens when we do in terms of meaning and sound, and then also like continuing to think about verbs and stuff.
Alexa, what does Koshnik mean? Sorry, man. I had to try.
Yeah, someday they'll just be like the Google earpiece, I think, right? So it'll just be like translating everything for us, or C3, 6 million languages.
I was trying to attempt to talk to your watch.
Okay. Okay. I think this is where we left off. So again, we'll just read it. We'll just walk through a few parts. If you have any questions, thoughts, go ahead. We'll all take turns. I see, well, 16, but we have a few observers. So if you're a student of Tlingit, I should be hearing your voice. That's very helpful to me to hear how you folks are reading stuff. And it's also really good practice for you to do whole sentence, big language stuff. So who wants to go first? Oh, hold on. I see a mistake. Okay. Are we waiting for something? Tl'anaxéedáḳw.
Ha. Tl'anaxéedáḳw guksati.
Good. Cheese. Oh, good. I'll do more good.
Ganashkide kaga yukhat nagasegit ye awe adlekes.
Yeah, away. Good. Cheese. So we get the ha. That's a good storytelling device. It's just like, oh my, right? There's different ways we could interpret that one. Tl'anaxéedáḳw. And then we see this suffix that ties it to the seti verb. Seti is to be a member of a group. Like tlukach adich chatseti, Tlingit chaseti, Tl'anaxéedáḳw chatguchsati. So chatguchsati is I am going to become one of these things. Ku atletuwu chatguchsati. I'll become a teacher. As'ewu chatsati. I'll become a saner. Right? Tl'anaxéedáḳw. Tl'anaxéedáḳw is poor people. Tl'anaxéedáḳw is poor people. So that's what the ka is right there. Ka yu Tl'anaxéedáḳw. So this one is, so she's using some hortative verbs here. So, so sake is, well, this one's pretty complicated. I'd have to spend some time with it. But basically, like if you want to use this advanced form, I'm going to do this thing so I could do this thing. Okay, so this is so this other thing could happen. What you do is for now, you look up the hortative form. So like nachtu at. So that's let's go, right? So you could say achtili ayech, or yeah, achtili ayech uskkodeyek aded nachtu adit. So then you got to put a T at the end. That's a little bit complicated, but it's what we call purposive. You don't have to remember that. It's just so it can happen. I will become the Tl'anaxéedáḳw so that I can help poor people. Ye awe audleches. This is to make a strong wish. Okay. Next line, or lines, however many you want to read.
I'll do it.
Sheesh.
Tle ach awe you uagut tle. Du ka cha shaude hin we at dugu. Cha kajinach awe we yanagut.
Sheesh. So we see uwagut, yanagut, walking, away from it. Right, so there it is again, this thing we just looked at. Ute, there's another thing we just looked at. Way over there, she went way over there. Ute uwagut, they went way over there. Duka, on her. Cha, you see. Sheyadehin, lots. We'at dugu, hides. Chakagenach, slowly. Like a porcupine or a sloth. Away yanagut, she's walking really slow. Next one, and ask questions if you got them or things you want to know about. Otherwise, we'll keep going. Long story.
I can go on this one.
Sheesh.
Wakuna tliye would goodisa we takwaneyi do dik ade shkao tlige.
Sheesh. So nachliye is far. Kunatliye is this far. So I might say, Tle du shukai away. Ye kunatliye. It's 6 miles to there. That's how long it is. So natliye is a long ways. Kunatliye is when you're saying like for a long time. And in this case, wa kunatliye sawe. It was a long ways, right? Wugudi, there it is. So we got uagut, yanagut, wugudi. All that same walking verb. Takani dich ka de. To like dich ka on, so towards being on her back. Shqaudlqay is a pretty complicated verb for a kid to fuss around.
What did you say that last one verb was for?
Fussing. I'd have to, let's see if I'll try and find it. That's one I'm not too familiar with. I'm looking for it in the verb dictionary. Let's see if I find it. I don't think it's in there. So while I'm looking for it, okay. Well, I didn't find it, but I will tell you is one thing. There is this pattern which starts with the SH, which is usually reflexive. It means to the self. Like I did something to myself, saw myself, touched myself, whatever the thing is. When you have those things and dle in the classifier, the literal structure is to pretend to be this thing. So whatever qai is. So shqaudliyesh, pretend to be raven. That's the verb for lying, right? And then you could say shqaudlina, pretend to be dead, right? So there's a whole bunch of things, but this is the pretend structure in Tlingit. It's pretty complicated, but then sometimes you're using this structure to say to do this thing. So let me mark it. Where's my little highlighter thing? I'll change its color. Then I'll know what to go look at later. Okay. Sheesh. Okay. Who wants to read next?
Ayawa awe an yanagut.
Sheesh. Ayawa is to shush a baby. So these are both probably pretty baby-specific verbs. Like this one, like that's, you know, to try and shush a baby and get it to stop crying. It's going to be ayawa. An is with it. In yanagut. She's walking with her baby. Next one.
As ya analtsin Tl'anaxéedáḳw.
Sheesh. So this one is pretty unusual, I think, because we have the contraction of tsin, which usually does not happen. So this would be like, if you pull this verb out, you might have tlitsin, strong. So ya analtsin, it's getting stronger. Kataqachi, it's crying. So qach is cry. Kataqach is usually like crying really loud. Sheesh. Just changing my little quotation marks. Next one.
Kanashkade Kach Juan Isan Gaacht Yue Outli Chase Way de York Kragaki.
Sheesh. So there's the poor people again. This CH marker specify who is doing the verb. So if it gets a little unclear who's doing the thing, that will pop up sometimes, right? So you'll see qusakha qanch, yelch. In this case, qnashkiteqa. And then the CH on it is saying them. Qan is sort of like lest it be that way, may it be that way. Isanqa'ach. These two is sort of saying, let it be heard. Let the voice be heard by the poor people. You awa outlaches. So this is how she's wishing it to be. We do yatkut kakachi. This ka is one of the only, so we call these a thematic prefix. It can go right here on a verb. It's the same ka. It's like a horizontal surface. It's related to this ka right here, which is on something. That's one of the ones that can, usually the vowel doesn't contract from those, but in this one it can. So kashahi or kashahit, you might know for writing. And you could say atyahayik shahit. So then it just turns into a K. My kids are making wild noises, so I'll just assume they're all okay. Oh, hold on, let me see. Okay. Who wants to read this one? Anybody not read yet? It's a good time to.
Educhat akach aya you kwati you awe ush.
Sheesh. So ulches and outleches. So ulches is like right now, right? So this is what's happening now. Here's ka. So when ka gets the on it, it goes long. A ka, right? Very similar things that we saw with you, we, he. So this one is pretty interesting because you and the K is putting the verb into this other form, like you ayatunk. So you're going to get a U in the front and then a K at the end of it. And it means happens on a regular basis. Not all the time, but just on a regular basis. Okay? So akakaya yuqatik, you awet ushchets. So she's saying, this is how I want it to regularly be. That's what she's praying. Oops. Oh, there we go.
Awe ach. Cha adasa akaihin yashkatnik. Du iga yu yasek yu awe ach in kadunigin.
Sheesh. So awe ach. Just you could say ach away there. You say away. It's a bit of a narrative device. So it's sort of like the ach away is that is why. Away is sort of like, and then it's just sort of like, well, that one's hard to translate. It's just sort of like, and this thing, right? cha adusa, whoever, right? So there's the adusa question particle with cha in front of it. That makes it whoever. Ak ayahin. Cha adusa ak ayahin. So this is to believe it. So then you can have sort of any kind of cha adusa ausaku, whoever knows it. Cha adusa yeyaoka, whoever said it, right? Yeshkashnik, this story. Du iqa you yasek. You owe ach in kadunigen. So if we, this yasek is the same one we saw, where was it, to help people? Right there. So this one is probably just doing a little bit of kind of analysis of the verb. Because you have you in front of it and k at the end, it's probably yasa. So once you put a k on sa, it'll become sake. But I'll take a closer look, because it could also be yasei, but I'll look at it. You aweh, that is how achin kadunigen, people used to tell it to me. So here's the du for the fourth person, the in for like they used to be but not anymore.
Why would you add a K to yesay? Did you say that's what marks that it happens regularly?
Yeah, so you get you and then the K at the end. But this is a form. So let me share something else with you folks. Okay, let's check out the chat. Okay, hold on. Let me open this other thing. So there are a number of resources out there that talk about verb modes. So we're going to talk about verb modes more and more. So this is Hausane Chayuchatangi. If we go down to this chapter, 18, talking about verb modes, and if we go through here, there's quite a few of them, right? So this is doing it, does it, it is that way. This is not doing it, doesn't do it, it isn't that way. Did it, or became that way, didn't do it, didn't become that way, will do it, will become that way, won't do it, won't become that way, right? So this is how we sort of code these things. And then basically what it's showing you is it's saying, okay, if you have an object, it'll be there. The perfective marker will be between the object and the subject. If you have a subject, it'll be right there. The classifier must be plus I. And then there are predictable things with the stem, right? But all this stuff is sort of here for a quick guide. And once you learn how to do this, to say, I'm doing it, we're doing it, you're doing it, y'all are doing it, they're doing it, they plural are doing it, someone is doing it. This is what the prefixes will look like. Chasaku, watusaku, yisaku, yisaku, ausaku, wadudzaku. And so basically these are here so you could do a quick lookup as you learn how to put these things together yourself. Even though there's all these different, it's like here's a whole bunch of them, here's a whole bunch more, here's a whole bunch more, here's, you're gonna learn how to do all these things. You are. So like take the verb to succeed, right? So to succeed is going to be this, whoops, where'd it go? Yeah, this one. So this capital C means there's a consonant there. So for example, I obtained it, yachwatlach, yautuwatlach, yiyadlach, yayidlach, ayawatlach, yauduwatlach. And now I could change that Y to a K. I tried it out. Kachwaak, Kautuaak, Kiaak, Kayiak, Akawaak, Kauduaak. So this is sort of looking ahead a little bit at things that are to come. We're going to learn how to do these things. And one of my goals is to show you just some additional resources so you could look this stuff up. So part was like, let me just look it up while I learn what these parts are and how they get together. I also have these quick guides, and I'll show you a couple of them. There's a few of them that exist. But the form that we are talking about is called, and what these words mean, that the name of it isn't as important as what it is. It's called repetitive imperfective. It means it happens on a regular basis. But now when we start getting into verb modes, we're going to have to pay attention. Is it a zero conjugation, na, ga, or ka? Because if it's na, then we should expect you to be in front of it. And then we should expect k to be on the end. But that depends on the conjugation, right? So every verb belongs to one of these four: zero, na, ga, or ka. Generally, oh, go ahead.
That conjugation is in your dictionary.
Yes, when you look up so we'll look up a verb after this. Like we'll look up which one? Oh, I don't know. But we'll look up a verb after this to find it. So then it shows you examples with going through kind of act verbs, state verbs, event verbs, and motion verbs, trying to find every example of, mixing up the classifier and whether there's a conjugation or a thematic prefix on there or not. So here's ye ashach. They regularly hold on to it. Ashachitch, or akshachitch, like akshachitch. They write it on a regular basis. So here there's nothing before the verb. Ye you jiyanek. So there is the U and the K, right? So this is kind of an advanced form, but this means it happens regularly. Not all the time. You know, saying, I eat cornflakes, just every now and just on a regular basis, right? Okay. So when you do look up a verb, let me go find one. So maybe we'll look up that working verb. So we're going to go to this section, which is looking at the verbs listed by root. We'll go down to the N. However, well, let's just look it up first. So here's the N's. We'll go down to nay. And then, let's see, which name am I looking for? Yeah, it's that one. So now I'm going to look for ye, jene. So here it is here. I'll zoom in. So when you look this up, this is saying yay, and now that has to be in front of the verb. Then you're going to have j, that's the thematic prefix for hand. There's a subject right there. It's a zero group classifier. It's nay, that is the verb root. It's the second one, so there's some other nay, which is like, there's one for weaving, there's one for respect, there's some other ones. This letter H is talking about the stem variation. Okay, so Tlingit has a bunch of stuff about just every particular verb. Every verb, it has a bunch of information that you gotta learn. It has a classifier group. You gotta know, because it's gonna be zero or ya. It's gonna be zero or ya. Ne is going to be ne, ne, or ne, one of those three. It has a stem type. So this stem type plus this conjugation plus the verb mode is what's going to tell you whether that stem will be short and high, long and high, long and low. And it's a bit of a complicated thing, but you'll start to figure it out. It varies between verb modes. It's like the verb mode says, okay, if it's this thing and this thing, then it's that thing, right? For now, just look them up. Just look them up. And then it tells you what type of verb it is. And then it gives you the translation. A couple of examples. An ambitious person, I would say person instead of man, works all the time. Shetzaki literally means bony. So I guess you're bony if you work hard. I don't, that's just old Tlingit way of thinking of it. But this one, what I chose to do with this dictionary is to use the command form, the prohibitive form. So imperative is like the do it. The prohibitive, which is don't do it. The imperfective, doing it now or happening. The negative imperfective, not doing it now, not happening. Perfective, which is generally did it. Negative perfective, didn't. And then the futures. But those are the only ones those are the most common ones. If you want to look up the repetitive imperfective, the habitual, any of those more advanced forms, then you go into Carrie's work. I just figured, one, that's her work, and so go check it out. It's great stuff. Two is you can learn how to put those forms together. If you're going to use those forms, you should be at the point where you're learning all the parts and how to put them together. And then three, the dictionary would just get too long if I included every single verb form for all of those verbs. Okay. Yeah, away. Go to cheesh. That's it for tonight. See you on Thursday. We'll do more.
Man.
Huh?
You got a moment before at the end of the class?
Huh.
Miss Cheesh.
Where's cheesh?
Sheesh.
Goodness, geez.
Huh.
I had a real quick question. We always hear, hachqua, that's what you get. But if you do something and like you got the consequences of your actions, like that's what I get is something that I would say. Like, well, that's what I get. Would you just say hachqua chet, or is there a different way of? Go ahead.
Probably say chush yochtene. I did it to myself. Yeah, so hachqua I don't think works for yourself. So then I would probably switch it to a verb at that point. Oops, I was just going to send this to one. So it's in the chat. Chush yochtene. Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, there's longer things you could do as well. Like you could say, I knew it was going to happen, but I did it anyways. I'll put that one in there. And then I'd probably use, there's this kind of interesting thing you could do, a perfective possessive, which was like, I knew what was going to happen. So even though it's already happened, you're sort of putting yourself back into this previous time point. So then it's a future, but it's not a true future. So then it gets that possessive marker on there. We were using this for, when I first learned about this form, I was using it to tease someone. I said, Yechojian ita it kakrius and aqa away. Akatchatseo akwa twasagu shisniki. That's it. I thought you were going to wash yourself, but then I forgot that you like to smell yourself. So, but it was all in teasing. So, but now it's recorded, so now people know. All right.
Ganesh Chish.